Yeah, Chair Mariani, Chair Limmer, members of the committee. I'm Liz Richards, the Executive Director of Violence Free Minnesota, the Coalition to End Relationship Abuse. I represent our 90-member programs who provide advocacy and services to domestic and sexual violence victims across the state. I'm here to talk about victimization and reforms within the correctional system. Historically, the view has been that victim safety was maximized by increasing punishments, having longer sentences, more jail time, more prison time. And we as a coalition helped advance that thinking. But in working with our programs and hearing from victim survivors, we have learned a lot over the years and have really shifted our thinking. We know that victim safety is actually enhanced with good criminal legal system reforms and good correctional reforms. So I want to highlight a few things that we know about victimization and corrections. We know that many domestic violence victims remain in relationship with the person who used violence. They may remain in the intimate partner relationship, they may have children in common, but in these situations and for many others, what the victims want is for the violence to stop, for the behavior to change. They want to see the person who used violence be in treatment, to be involved in effective programming that will change the violent behavior. We know that those who are serving time in prison still interact with their families. Most of them are going to be released and returned to their communities, sometimes to the same family unit. Their families and their communities want to see the changes in violent behavior as well. We also know that for those people in prison who never again have contact with a specific domestic violence victim, they will have contact with others. They will go on to having new intimate partner relationships. One of the things we do at our coalition is we collect data and publish an annual domestic violence homicide report. And every year we see at least one homicide where the perpetrator has a history of domestic violence and they've served time in jail or prison, but they go on and they commit a homicide, and the person they commit the homicide against is a new victim. So we know that if we do not change a person's behaviors and patterns, there will be a next victim. We know that simply serving prison time does not change behavior. So the question is, how do we hold people accountable for using violence in ways that will change behavior? And the Minnesota Rehabilitation and Reinvestment Act is a reform measure that asks those very questions. And it's looking to advance reforms along those lines. It includes things like domestic abuse transformation programming to change violent behavior. It includes support services for victim survivors to address safety needs. And it addresses the successful reentry questions about how do we reintegrate people back into their families and communities. I want to mention a couple of other things. There are other ways that the victim needs and issues show up in corrections work. We know that there are tremendous negative impacts on families when a parent is incarcerated, economic as well as psychological, emotional impacts. And we need to consider the minor children of those who are incarcerated, the Healthy Start Act, which allows women who are pregnant or immediately postpartum to be placed into community alternatives, providing treatment and programming, allowing children to remain with their mothers. This will result in better outcomes for the children and for the mothers. And finally, I want to highlight, we have historically spoken about victimization and perpetration as two wholly separate and distinct populations, and we know that's false. Violence Free Minnesota has been working for the past 2 years on a project at Shakopee Women's Correctional Facility, looking at the victimization that occurs of women that occurs prior to incarceration, and it has a specific focus on Native women. So we have interviewed 62 women who are within Shakopee or have been recently released from Shakopee. All but one of those women have extensive histories of violence and abuse prior to incarceration. National statistics show that 79% of women in federal and state prisons report past physical abuse. Over 60% report past sexual abuse. The national statistics on prior victimization of men who are now in prison, they're harder to come by, but some studies show as close to 60% of men in federal and state prisons have histories of child abuse. So we know that many of those who are within our prisons have histories of victimization, and that victimization needs to be addressed as well. So if we're going to stop cycles of violence and abuse, we need reforms within corrections. Our coalition, along with the other crime victim coalitions, have been included in the reform conversations with the Department of Corrections. And Violence Free Minnesota supports the reform initiatives that the Department of Corrections is putting forward. Thank you.